Welcome to Fort Worth 148's podcast, where we meet to discuss Masonic topics and strive to build value in the brotherhood. The opinions and statements of the participants do not represent any positions or stance of any Grand Lodge or Lodge and are solely the viewpoints of the participants. Welcome back to the podcast, brothers. This is Rhit Moore, past master and current secretary at Fort Worth 148.
This is Billy Hamilton, junior warden for 148.
This is Gabriel Jagush, senior deacon of 148, and we have a special guest today.
I'm Corey Harris, junior past master of Arlington Lodge, number 438.
Junior past master? Huh. And so, some of you may have already heard our first episode where we interviewed Corey right before he went in as the master of the lodge for Arlington Lodge. And that's why we've got him on the show today. We're doing a Fraternal Spotlight with the older, wiser, grouchier Corey Harris now that he's a past master. So,
yeah, absolutely. And guys, I can't wait to tell you all how we did it in my year.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Back
yeah.
in my year.
Oh, yeah. My year, let me tell you.
We walked up the hill both ways and had to pee in the snow. So before we kick off the main episode content, let's have some discussion questions. First discussion question. I have posted this uninteresting picture or uninteresting post to the a Masonic Facebook group. Can I get an SMIB? An SMIB? No, piss off. You're ruining the craft online for all of us. Anyway,
What the heck?
so I'm just sorry. I saw that earlier today and I just no. That's crappy, y'all. Anyway, our listeners are probably not that kind of crowd, but anyway, I saw that.
Can't force people to be my friend.
Yeah. So in a lodge
SMIB for life.
SMIB. In a lodge or body struggling with gaining or retaining officers, is it worth it to let a poor officer preside rather than risk them leaving entirely if they get passed over? So the question is again, in a lodge or body struggling with gaining or retaining officers, is it worth it to let a poor officer preside rather than risk them leaving entirely if they get passed over? Have at it, y'all.
Yeah, well, proceed, Corey.
I'll tell you, I'll go ahead and throw my 2 cents in just because it's your guys' show, so I'll go ahead and say it first. In my opinion, nobody should preside over a lodge that is not 110% qualified to do so. And I think this is a problem we get into in Masonry is that we're so focused on filling chairs and getting petitions that we forget that this fraternity of ours is not destitute. We're not beggars. We can be choosers. And not everyone is fit to govern a lodge. Not everyone is fit, just like not everyone's fit to run a business. A lodge is no different. There are some people who are great workers and there are some people who are great managers. And we've had a similar situation in the years past in Arlington where, a particular brother did not advance despite feeling like he should have or maybe was entitled to. And it did cost us his attendance. And that is sad. And it certainly was a regrettable situation. But the point is that you serve at the will and pleasure of the brethren. And if the brethren do not feel they are satisfied as to your qualifications, it is for them to make the decision.
That's the key. And the one caveat in that little scenario is them struggling with membership. I know you guys at 438, that's not something in the metropolitan area most of us don't really deal with as much as, say, the West Texas lodges, to where you got 6 guys there,
But Rhit, it's all relative, and it's like I tell folks all the time when they say, how many members does Arlington have? And I tell them, and they say, oh, wow. And I say, well, yeah, but it's still the same percentage of people that show up. So how many members does your lodge have? And they said, we've got 40 members. And I said, how many show up? And they say, 8 or 9. I said, well, yeah, you're right there in the same percentage. Arlington's got 500 members, and at a stated meeting, we're lucky if we get 50 guys to show up. You know what I mean? So it's like, it seems like, wow, you got 50 guys to your stated meeting? That's a fraction of what we have, just like every other lodge. So it's all about the percentage. Masonry is operating on about an 8 to 10%, and every lodge can pretty much show those numbers. With memberships of 200 plus, they usually get 2.5, 2.25 at their monthly business meetings. And then you can figure less half of that for any kind of called meeting, like a degree.
Yeah. And see, that's the thing that, my point is they may have more of a duty of really trying to push that guy to get him ready before they push him out of the lineup. If you don't have many options, you want to do your best to get that guy ready. And if he's not going to cooperate, then you have a duty as a brother to push him out of the lineup.
Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest things too is there is a mentality in Masonry that the line to Worshipful Master begins outside the door. And that is just not the case. You have appointed positions in your lodge and you have elected positions in your lodge. And just because you are the senior deacon does not mean you are entitled to be the junior warden.
Yeah.
Or just because you're the senior steward does not mean that you are entitled to be the junior deacon.
You got to think of it in a sense, too, that some guys only want to be an officer for maybe 1 or 2 years, and they don't want to progress. So if you make that a progressive lineup, they think, well, if I volunteer to be an officer, I'm in the hopper now and on a 7-year journey to be master. And they probably don't want that.
And, and conversely, it could work against you as well. There may be guys who have a desire to be Worshipful Master one day, but they have no desire of going through all the chairs. And though that may not be the most palatable way to do it, there's nothing wrong with not being a steward and being a Worshipful Master. Do I think there's value in it? Absolutely. But just because a guy's never washed dishes doesn't mean he's not going to be a good presiding officer. Some people are just not going to do that. And I think it keeps... we miss an opportunity to have great leaders. If you set the standard that, buddy, the line starts outside the door, unless you're willing to be the Tyler and 2 years of stewardship and 2 years of deacon, and then, sorry, there's no place for you here. If you set that standard, I think you're going to discourage a lot of people who would make great officers.
Completely agree. The progressive line, I guess it could work in some scenarios, but in most.
No, but, in here I am. I'm going to go ahead and say it. I'm a product of a progressive line. I was raised a Master Mason, and then I attended a stated meeting until I was installed as the junior steward, and then I was a senior steward, a junior deacon, a senior warden. But I have no problem with that. But every year I was an officer, I made all the meetings, I put in the work. I was still am, right, a young guy. So to me, I had to prove to all the guys of this, very old and very proud lodge that we have that, guys, I'm equal to the task. You can give me the keys for a year and we're going to be fine. And so I kind of took it on as a personal mission to work a little bit harder and, be there earlier, put on great meals, get involved in degree work. So, I didn't take my progression as, well, because I'm the senior steward, that means I get to be the junior deacon. I proved myself and made myself, qualified. And if the Worshipful Master asks me to be the next officer, then I was more than happy to oblige.
Well, I guess that brings up another question I have. Is attendance enough to progress as an officer?
Like attendance alone?
Like, let's say you make every meeting, or as many meetings as you can. But let's say you're just really kind of crap at your ritual responsibilities or your functional responsibilities.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. All right. But I feel like, and I feel silly for asking that, right? Like, I feel, because Billy and I were actually, we had this question asked of us by an unnamed person. And we were kind of discussing the question, right? And so it feels kind of silly to ask, hey, if you're kind of crap at your job, do you get to advance? And it's silly to ask that, but it needs to be asked in this day and age. In Masonry, because sometimes the answer is like, yeah, sure, it's whatever, you know.
No, and Corey hit
and
the
it's
nail
like,
on.
and why would your answer ever be, yeah, sure?
Well,
You know?
Corey hit the nail on the head. We've gotten into that beggar's mentality, and we have to get out of it. That may mean you have to serve twice, you know, as an officer to hold that standard you want to hold. But we should be choosers.
Absolutely. And I think Rhit and Gabe, I think you guys were at the Festive Border Table Lodge, whatever we call it, where Brad Billings was speaking, and
Yes.
I stood up and made that point about how, you know, we've got to be more cautious about who we invite, and I mean invite into this fraternity, and I mean, you know, the guys who come asking for us, they come and ask us, and then it is our prerogative to extend to them an invitation at that point. And, you know, you probably got guys in your lodge. We've got guys in our lodge. If you read a petition with their name on it, you can almost bet that these guys, you know, this guy has no idea who this petitioner is. He probably came in, he talked to him one time, and they put his name on a petition. That is a no-no. It is our responsibility to not only know the person coming in, but to make sure that this guy knows what he's getting into. You know, we have to make sure that we set a standard for what masonry is, that if this guy doesn't feel he can live up to that standard, even if it's a lofty standard, then he just doesn't choose to go any further. You know, and I made this point to several different masons in various meetings that I would rather raise 3 master masons and take in 5 petitions than take in 10 petitions and raise 4 master masons. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay, I mean, yeah, in one scenario, we've got 1 extra master mason, but in that same scenario, we've got 6 guys who came in, knelt at our altar, took an obligation, and left. And we've made a mason at that point. And now he's off in the world doing what? I mean, he is a mason at that point. And so we have failed. If we would have maybe done a better job of qualifying this gentleman, maybe he would have knelt at our altar 3 times, and we'd have a master mason and somebody we can truly count as one of our own moving forward.
Well, and I guess it's a good point, right? I mean, that if we want our fraternity to seem like something that has value, we need to start treating it like it has value.
No, that's a great,
Absolutely.
because those guys that came in and left, the best we're going to get out of if somebody asks them about Freemasonry is, meh, you know, it was okay. But probably we're going to get, yeah, it was horrible. So we have a whole legion of people that came in, became EAs out there, you know, at best talking about our fraternity as average to subpar.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all because we didn't vet them properly. So.
Sure. And that doesn't make somebody a bad person. You know, this past year, whenever somebody's coming to our lodge looking for a petition or wanting to know about masonry, if they've crossed my path, I'd always have a very earnest conversation with them, and I'd ask them some questions as opposed to them asking me questions. You know, first thing I want to know is what do you know about masonry? What connections do you have to masonry? Why are you here today? Why did you walk into our doors? And let these guys answer some questions, right? Because we are in that position. They want something from us. We have something. Maybe it's something they want, maybe it's not. But we're going to find out what that is before we just open the door, you know? And then dive in a little bit deeper. What do you think masonry is? What do you think masonry has that you want? And if by listening to this gentleman's responses, I really think that, you know what, I think he could find something useful in masonry, we'll take the conversation further. But almost indubitably, one of the responses you're going to get when you ask them, they're going to say, well, I want to do good in the community. You know, I want to do charitable works and stuff like that. So I tell them, I say, that's great. That's a noble, very noble thing. If your only goal is to be involved in the community and do charity work, I would suggest the Lions Club or something like that. You know, I'm a past president, current treasurer of the Greater Arlington Lions Club. We give away in excess of $50,000 a year in Arlington and to other charities. Well, most of it's in Arlington, but we have our international charities that we have to sponsor according to our Lions Club International. So I say, guys, if you want to be out there and part of the community and all that stuff, there are service organizations. That's not Masonry. Now, we have some service projects. We have scholarship projects, but that's not Masonry. For us, it is an introspective journey for a man. Now, we go through it with our brothers and our friends, but for each man, Masonry is a very unique, it's a very intimate path. Now, if that's not what you're looking for, great. That doesn't make me a bad guy. Maybe you'd be happy in another organization. So it's just like, that's the kind of conversations I talk about, but it also sets a great standard for this guy. He's not going to come in and I'm just going to spill the beans and act like, man, you'd be doing me a huge favor if you signed a petition. You know, the impression I get is if you want something from us, you're going to need to come, you're going to need to come up more regular, have dinner with us, meet our guys. You're going to have to be a part of this lodge before we let you be a part of this lodge.
Yeah.
And I know you guys do the same thing. I know I hear great things from 148 about your vetting process and stuff like that. So
no, and
I know you guys know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, there's too much value to really expand on. But, if you don't give him time to get to know guys and see if he's going to mesh, because there may be personality conflict and could run peace and harmony. And you he's going to fit this other lodge great. So you send him on down the road, whatever it may be. Or not ever give him a petition.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you'll run into guys there that
several guys I've come across, and I mean, obviously, I'm not speaking against the brother Mason, but I mean, there's been a few guys I've come across where I've thought, how did this guy, I mean, just from having speaking with them for a few minutes and stuff, I just go, man, I mean, if somebody really would have taken the time to sit down and talk to this guy, it's not like he's a bad guy, but I don't think this is what he thought he was getting into.
Yeah. No,
and that's just not good for anybody. That's not good for us. That's not good for them. I mean, that's not good for anybody. Because Masonry is a time consuming and, money consuming activity.
Yeah. And we've had incidents where we talk to guys that are seeking the degrees and it's not even just that like, hey, this isn't a good fit for you, but like, sometimes it's a case of like, hey, like we feel like you are a threat to our safety, or because every once in a while you have an incident like that, and it is very scary, just with some of the guys that you run across that are interested in getting the degrees. But and usually they don't get through, but sometimes they do. So,
well, and sometimes you just have a lodge that's so hungry for members that unfortunately they just, anybody that comes asking, they give. And I don't fall. I mean, maybe that's just easy for me to say. I understand that. Maybe it's easy for me to say because when push comes to shove, Arlington's not starving. We can survive. So it's one of those things, right? I mean, things are different from different points of view. And so I'm not going to speak for everybody and say this is the way it should be. The law has spoken, but, the way I see it from, albeit a nice position, we should be much more selective with who we choose to let into our fraternity.
Yep.
Absolutely. And including who we let preside,
in my opinion, more especially.
Yeah.
More especially because your presiding officer, he is, and I don't want to, I'm being cautious how I say this, but he is your lodge. He's the face of it. He's the custodian of it. He is everything to that lodge. It's a great responsibility that we give him. And he should be somebody who is a cut above. He should be somebody who respect to the brethren and the trust and the confidence. That's that this guy knows what he's comfortable giving him our lodge for a year. And so I think that's a very serious thing. And, It's not something that should be taken lightly, and it's not something that should be, gotten through. You got through your year, good for you. It should be something, the lodge should grow under your year if you can help it.
Right. So that was a heck of a way to start off the discussion. I like that. We have a couple more discussion questions piled up, but in the interest of time, we'll save those for the next few episodes. So, listeners, again, main episode content is our Fraternal Spotlight with Corey Harris, who is the Junior Past Master of Arlington Lodge 438. Corey, we're going to ask you some questions that we asked you last year, right? Like, not all of these questions are ones that we asked you last year, but a lot of them are, because we're going to that'll give us a good before and after sort of picture. Can you tell us a little bit about Arlington Lodge?
What do you want to know about it specifically?
What kind of crowds, what kind of crowd is Arlington Lodge, and what are you known for as a lodge?
Well, I would say traditionally Arlington was kind of renowned for its degree work, but more recently, I would have to say, at the risk of sounding a little arrogant, would be dynamic personalities. And what I mean by that is there are some real characters in Arlington Lodge. James Kirkpatrick, Zachary Hastings, Floyd Hall. I mean, and that's what I mean by just, guys that have a reputation of kind of being a little bit bigger than Masonry. And you know what? There's a lot of opinion as to whether or not that's a good or a bad thing. But I'll tell you what, Arlington Lodge has a little bit of a reputation in the state because for so many years we've produced a lot of state officers and a lot of guys who've been very active in the various departments of Masonry. Mm-hmm. And so, like I said, at the risk of sounding a little arrogant, I would have to say it's just we've got personality. We've got some guys that are really shaking some things up and making some waves, and people are noticing it in both their degree work or would it be their grand offices or any honors they hold. I said there's some good guys out there right now.
No, I think that's spot on, because I can think of many different characters is a good way to describe them, which you included. I mean, you fit the bill perfectly. I always enjoy my visits there.
And most people do. And, even though there are a handful of, just like in every lodge, there's a handful of guys that are, strictly by the numbers for the most part. Arlington's is a very friendly atmosphere. We've got a lot of guys who they're just, we're fraternal. We enjoy people visiting. We like to show them a good time. And usually after our meetings, we like to go out and have a good time with each other. And so it's a very welcoming lodge.
Yeah, and the thing that I like is that the pride that those members have, that they have the best lodge in the state of Texas. And it really reminded me that if you don't feel that way about your lodge, you should probably go visit if you've got lodges close to you and see if you can find one that you think is the best lodge in Texas. Because
Rhett, that was one of the central themes of my lodge articles this year. Obviously we have our trestle board, and then the principal officers provide an article. And at the end of every stated meeting, I would always reserve a few minutes just as a master's address. And it was either a cool anecdote about something, or I would just get up and just brag on Arlington for a little bit. And I would tell the guys and say, guys, if you don't get out and visit in our district and in our state, you're missing out. And you have no idea what I'm talking about when I'm telling you that, we really have a statewide reputation. Now, that could be a good or a bad one, but, if people know about you, they know about you.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. So like I said, we've got some characters, and does everybody like them all? No, but that's okay. I'm proud of all the guys that I share fellowship with in Arlington. I can truly say I wouldn't trade any of them. Now, I love you guys. I love my 148 guys. And I love any time I get a chance to visit with what I believe is the second best lodge in Tarrant County. But in fairness, it's a close second, guys. It's a close second. But
Well-
but we're strong enough lodges where we could have a real healthy rivalry with each other.
That's what I'm
and
talking
that's
about.
a blessing. That's a
Yeah.
blessing. I mean, 148 and a lot of other lodges. I'm not just singling us out, but there's a lot of lodges that, especially in the 64th district, that are strong enough where we could have real healthy rivals. And that's great because, I love 148. I love all you guys. I thought Greg did a great job this year. I love Greg to death. I love you guys. And so I like to kind of pick and jab with y'all a little bit because, at the end of the day, I'm as proud to sit in lodge with any one of you guys as any other Mason in this state. So, it makes it fun for me to kind of get to, just have a little bit of fun with you.
No, because in the end, we're all winners. If we're doing something
Absolutely.
better to try to keep up with another lodge, we're all winners.
Well, and to me, that's the heart of, a lot of the Facebook controversy I see. I don't engage in it just because I don't see there's any future in that. But, I know some Masons have taken a lot of criticism about some of their Facebook posts and the things they post and the yada yada. And to me, those are such good things for Masonry. They create, sorry about that. My daughter dropped the cup. They create a lot of excitement and they create a little bit of competition. It makes Masons, in my opinion, want to go places and check in and tag people and do these things. And when that happens, you get a news feed just full of traveling Masons. And again, to me, if you're not out there traveling, you can't help but feel like maybe you're missing out on something. There's people out there having fun and developing relationships with Masons all over the state. And if you're not doing that, maybe you regret it a little bit. And maybe it makes you want to go out there and travel and be a part of that. And there's some great guys who are leading that kind of mentality. Ricky Cox, and God help me for giving him credit, Brad Billings. That's okay. Brad will listen to this, so I can go ahead and razz him.
Yeah. No, you're exactly
But those
right.
guys, they're creating all kinds of social media excitement. And you're starting to see them pop up all over the place. The hashtags this and the hashtags that. And that's fun. And I think it's good for the fraternity. It's not demeaning. It's not disrespectful. Some of the things that I've heard and all this other stuff. I really don't feel that way. I think it breeds excitement.
Well, and as cheesy as it sounds, what I post on Facebook, I don't do the political stuff. I post of the moments I want to remember. So if I'm posting about lodge, it's special to me. And it may seem in some people a slight that I put a hashtag to it, but it's all to improve our standing in the community. Gabe, you got another question for us?
I do.
What was the original question?
I believe
think it has something to do with-
the
yeah, what was
original
Arlington
question
famous for?
the
That's
original question was, can you tell us a little bit more about your lodge? But I guess what is your favorite aspect of Masonry and why?
Boy. Okay. Well, this really actually isn't that tough of a question. My favorite aspect about Masonry is the ritual. And there's several reasons for that. One, because it's people enjoy what they do well. I'm a ritualist. I do the ritual well. I remember things well. But I think the reason why I enjoy it is not just because I can remember it well, but I really enjoy the meaning behind it. I enjoy the process and the study of memorizing it and not committing it to my brain, but committing it to my heart. And it's a comfort to me because I recall these things a lot of times when I'm bored or just, find myself laying in bed at night and having trouble sleeping. I'll pull out an oration from the 14th degree of the Scottish Rite and just kind of say it in my head. And I just enjoy it. It's a comfort to me. So,
Just give her a headset, Corey. Let's bring her on.
Yeah. But the problem is she's chasing the dog around with the Barbie doll, and my dog really wants no part of it. But
Yeah.
again, it's just that has really kind of become a source of comfort for me. And the work is truly beautiful. And I've had people ask me before, what do I get out of it? What do I get out of memorizing really what takes a tremendous amount of time to memorize all the various parts of degrees and orations and all this stuff. I say, what do you get out of that? I say, what I get out of it is I get to do a great job for somebody else.
Yep.
When I'm working in a degree, man, especially if I'm conferring it or if I'm giving an oration to somebody, it is eyeball to eyeball, from the heart, very sincere. The only thing that exists in the whole world to me at that moment is me and the candidate, and I get to give them something that hopefully they'll never forget. I know I'll never forget the most influential things that were given to me through Masonic ritual and who gave them to me. So hopefully, and maybe I'm overthinking it, but hopefully they feel that way. And hopefully by putting in the countless hours memorizing this and working on the timing, the delivery, the emphasis, that it will truly be something that they can put in their hearts and carry with them as a keepsake of Masonry.
I mean, the bottom line is on that, Corey, is that you only have to change one guy's life to make it worth all that effort you put throughout your whole life. So that's the odds are totally in your favor. That's a fact, and maybe because I spend so much time toiling over it and all that, it kind of bothers me a little bit. I wish they would move those prompters a little closer to the stage for the Scottish Rite reunions, because I'm going to be honest with you, when I'm giving a long oration and I see guys leaning over, they're reading off the thing, I'm like, guys, up here, I'm talking to you, So, and they can't help it. It's like subtitles on a movie, right? You can't help but be drawn, but I'm just like, I keep telling the stage crew, I'm like, wish you guys would just bring those a little closer and close them off where the candidates can't see them, because it's very distracting to them.
Yep.
And to me, it's disrespectful for the people who have taken all this time to put on these dramas. And most of them do an exceptional job, and it's taking away from them. And it's taking away from the candidates. Because
I remember going through the Scottish Rite degrees and just reading the teleprompters.
I was going to say,
of course,
I'm feeling bad
help it.
now.
It's right there. No, I mean, guys, trust me, it's not you. It's right there. It's like subtitles on a movie. If they're there, you can't help but read them. Yeah. So it's like, I just wish they'd close them off and just let the candidates be a part of it. Take away that distraction and just let us do it, and you be a part of it. So, but yeah. I get it. It's 3 long days, so I'm just talking. I mean, that's. But
no, that's something we can shoot for. I think all of us too feel that same way about the degrees, because I know right. Gabe helped in a bunch. I helped in a few. Billy always is there to help.
Yeah. But the ritual work, to answer your question simply, the ritual work's my favorite part of Masonry. Now, in a very, very close, like separated by a hair second, is absolutely the fellowship. All of my friends are Masons. I mean, I have a few friends that I've had through childhood and schooling and college. I mean, really, you put childhood, high school, and college all together, I've got 5 friends that I've managed to hang on to at this point in my life. Other than that, all of my friends are Masons. And not my acquaintances. I mean, my friends, they are, after all these years now, they've become very good friends. And, they know my kids. I know their kids. They know my wife. I know their wife. We go to dinners together. We're friends. And so, to me, like I said, a very, very close second. And on any given day, they can switch places.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a stock answer for people. But, I mean, really, it has to be the relationships that you develop with the people that you develop them with. I mean, no other institution in the world could bring so many different people from so many differing backgrounds and put them in one place at one time. I mean, I get to share a lodge room with guys who are on Iwo Jima, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
Where else on any path of life would our paths cross? They just wouldn't. So.
Yeah, maybe randomly. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but I mean, maybe randomly, but we wouldn't have a relationship. I mean, we wouldn't know each other.
No, and I think you're right. If Masonry is doing its job, one of those two should be, they should be 1 and 2, fraternalism and ritualism. Whether it's fraternalism's 1 or ritualism, one of those two should be, those should be your top 2.
And when you think about it, one kind of leads into the other, because if the ritual is done right, that time you spend bonding, as an instructor teaching a candidate a life lesson should lead to the fraternal aspect of it later on.
Absolutely.
Or even just as a degree team that's, sitting there in the lodge on an off night, and you're hashing out the degree and you're going, oh crap, how did this part go again? Or you're going, wait a minute, but this piece of furniture is in the way. What do we do with that? And as you go through, it's all these little things that you go through. How do we walk around this room? Like, how do we want to put up the altar sometimes? Because there's degrees where you have to move the altar sometimes, right? All these little things are the off moments where all the fraternalism happens. In order to make ritual happen, you have to be friends. But Corey, what do you see as the strengths and weaknesses of Texas Masonry?
Oh, the strengths and I'll tell you one. One is both a strength and a weakness. The biggest strength of Texas Masonry is pride. Absolutely. I've traveled to Masonry in a lot of different states in this country. Not yet internationally. I haven't sat in lodge in another country, but I've sat in lodge in many other states. And the reputation of Texas pride is well known nationally, and it's very well respected and a bit envied. Texas Masonry is it's held up in a lot of other states. People want the Texas Masonry regalia. They want the Texas Mason pins and stuff like that. During Wendell Miller's year, I was traveling more so than I had in the past couple of years. And do you know how many of Wendell's pins I had to buy and mail to other lodges? Because, he had like a quintessential just Texas pin, that star that was, the raised up letters. And it was very pretty, very simple. And all the Grandmasters had beautiful pins, but this one was just very emblematic of Texas. And I must have sent out, seriously, 25 of those. I've had to mail them to Worshipful Master over here, or I'd have to buy one to reimburse myself because I take it off my jacket and give it. But so the pride of Texas Masonry is very well known and respected. Now, that is also a weakness. And the reason why it's a weakness is because we have this idea of what Masonry should be, and this idea is old. And the reason why it's old is because we're holding ourselves to a standard of 50 and 60 years ago that's just not realistic. Now, that's not to say that, well, why is it not realistic? Is Masonry dying? No. There was a different mentality 40, 50, 60 years ago. And because of that mentality, we saw a huge surplus in membership throughout the state. And it seems like now the pride of that membership is seeming almost like we're failing at what we're doing now, even though we're not. Masonry is not dying in Texas, but we have this pride of where we were, and we feel like we're coming up short. Guys, we're not coming up short. Masonry is still very much alive and well.
That's awesome. I've never thought of it that way, because I really truly I feel like that's spot on. That those numbers were something to be proud of when we had over 250,000 Masons, and now we don't. So we're failing, right?
Well, and again, guys, don't take this anyway. Anybody who's listening, this is certainly not this is nothing against Grand Lodge or anything, but it's like a lot of the directives, it feels like they come from Grand Lodge, are always about more, and it has to be, right?
Yeah.
It has to. Just like, the Grand Lodge is the government of Masons in Texas, just like the government of Americans in this country, right? It has to be more. But here's what we need to remember. Guys, we're doing good, okay? And that goes back to the beggars, choosers, not beggars principle. Texas Masonry is alive and well, guys. We are not dying. But you just have to understand the difference between Masonry 60 years ago and Masonry today you have to look at the difference in the world 60 years ago and the world today. 60 years ago, we had a tremendous number of men returning from conflicts overseas who had developed them fraternal bonds, and they were looking for another outlet of fraternity. When they came home, they found it in the Masonic Lodge. Mm-hmm. Then they had children. And, fast forward 18, 20 years, which puts us at the end of that, right? So 40 years ago, they become Masons in this baby boomer generation. Now, we're also going to see a tremendous development in distractions, television, entertainment, right? All the other superfluities that we have developed in life, they start biting for our time. Lodges start suffering because of it. Because it used to be, that's what a guy did. He went to lodge. There was nothing else to do. Now there's all kinds of other things to do. Our professions have gotten more encroaching on our lives. So, where it used to be a guy worked from 9 to 5, very few people work from 9 to 5 anymore, guys. I know I work all the time. It's not uncommon. Well, what I mean by that is because we have the technology, if I see an email in my inbox at 9:30 at night, I answer it. Because why wait until the morning? I'm here. I know the answer. So that's what I mean. The world around us has changed. Now, let's talk again about all these guys who joined coming home from World War II, Korea, and so forth. Now they're dying. And they're not being replaced because they were part of a huge surplus. And obviously, we're not going to replenish the numbers faster than those surplus Masons are dying. So if you look at the graphs, you go, oh my God, we're losing Masons hand over fist and we're going into the ground. It's leveling off. Okay, just like that spike went up, that spike went down, and now it's leveling off. We are reaching a level, and that's where we're going to operate. So if you just, there's a couple of guys talking about what I'm talking about right now around the state, and it's kind of a message of, guys, this doom and gloom philosophy that seems to be going around, it's not rooted in reality. We're not dying. We're truly not. The numbers, if you look at a graph over a span of 60 years, it could be frightening. But you have to understand what those numbers are telling you.
No, I think you're exactly right.
It's a snapshot. It's not a trend. It's a snapshot.
And that's the biggest part, is that we only ever look at this 60, 70, 80-year window, right? And if you look at, just for example, the 300 years of organized public masonry, right? This is not even counting prior to the organization of the Grand Lodges. But if you look at the numbers for it's we're just, like you said, we're just settling back in. And this is there was an earthquake in the 30s and 40s and 50s, and now things are just falling back into place. And
here's something to consider too, guys.
Those 60 years instead of like the full-blown several centuries.
Well,
and here's something to consider as well. If you look at these lodges, people are saying, well, masonry's dying because look at all these lodges that are empty. Those lodges were born out of surplus. Mm-hmm. That's why they were born. They were born because we had such a boom of Masons. Well, those Masons that filled those lodges, they're dying. And they're in the remote parts of the state. So am I standing here advocating to get rid of those lodges? No. But what I'm saying is that they were born because of a surplus of membership in that area. Well, that surplus is dying off. And so just because that lodge is lacking membership now, you can't say, well, this is indicative to Masonry dying in Texas. No, it's just showing that the surplus that created that lodge is dying. And because it's a remote area, there isn't somebody to fill that void. It's not indicative of Masonry as a whole. It's purely regional.
Well, and so what I take away from that too is, you're right. The membership will ebb and flow, but the important thing, it's not the quantity. As long as the quality is there, it won't ever truly die.
Really, I can't agree with that more. I mean, truly, I cannot agree with that more. The proof is already living, right? Arlington Lodge is growing and thriving on the backs of 50 Masons, right? I mean, when you really count them all, the guys who are showing up, doing the work, all the stuff. Hey, guys, it takes dues to run a lodge. So I'm not saying, if you're not being active, then, to hell with you. That's not what I'm saying. But really, most lodges are being run, organized, governed by a handful of guys, So it's like, you're right. If as long as the quality is there, Masonry is not going anywhere. But so to answer the question, kind of circle back there. I would say the biggest strength of Texas Masonry, of course, is the pride, because nobody does Masonry better in the whole world than Texas. And if you ask any Texas Mason, he'll tell you that. And if you ask a lot of people around the world, they'll tell you that. But I do think that pride is also, it's causing us to be a little bit down on ourselves and set an unrealistic expectation. It's great to have goals, but your goals have to be reachable. And to set a membership goal, that of the 40s and 50s, I just think is unreasonable. And when you set the bar that high, you're just going to disappoint. You're just going to set yourself up for disappointment and not appreciate what you're doing. Masonry is growing in Texas, and we should be proud of that. And we should be celebrating that, not saying, guys, you're coming up short. You're coming up short. Well, yeah, we're going to come up short because I don't think the bar is reasonable.
It's just a different kind of growth.
Agreed.
Yeah. Looking back at this year that you served as Worshipful Master, what would you say is your happiest moment? And what would you say was your saddest or most upsetting, however you want to take that moment?
Say the happiest moment was, and I'm gonna use other people's words, not mine. I'm not a back patter. I'm just not. I don't particularly like to speak well of things I've done or because I don't ever want to come off as arrogant. But the happiest, most proud moment I had was at the end of my last stated meeting in June. I gave just a little address and essentially thanking everybody for the opportunity, for believing in me, for trusting in me, to letting a 29-year-old kid, take the wheel of this ship that goes back to 1875, of a ship that we were all very proud of. And a lot of people have worked hard to build and maintain, to let me have it, and truly let me have it. Nobody was over my shoulder micromanaging me or telling me how to do this. They believed in me, they trusted me, and they let me do it. And so thanking everybody for that opportunity. And then one by one, people stood up and told me what a great job I did. Now, the reason why that was so happy for me was not because, oh, good, I did a good job. The people that told me that are the people I have, some of the highest respect for in the whole world. And when they stood up in front of our brothers and told me they were proud of me and I did a good job and I was good for the lodge, that opinion from them was worth more than anything material. Comments about if you want to know what a Mason is, look no further than in the East. And, comments like that were just truly unbelievable. Because, again, guys, I love it. I really enjoyed my year as Worshipful Master. And I don't do it for those comments, but when people make them, you can't help but just feel an overwhelming sense of pride and appreciation. And, I'm not a person who's speechless very often, but I didn't have much to say. I held it together pretty good, but I was quite swollen with pride. That was one of the proudest moments in my life, to sit there and receive those comments from the people who I respect so much, who I've given so much of my time to work for them, to help them over, the last, 6 years that I've been an officer in the lodge, to hear that they thought I did well. That was worth more to me than anything else. And I would say say something.
I was going to say, I think that speaks volumes about how close knit a lodge is. Cause, I think about when I got my certificate and I got a standing ovation for my brothers, I'll never forget that because they mean so much to me. And
Sure.
it kind of goes back to that point, that if you don't feel like you got the best lodge and the best brothers in the state, do something about it or visit some other lodges,
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I was gonna comment on that, but as soon as the thought had come in, it was gone.
Well, and that's part of the process of becoming a better man. When you put in the effort and the time like you have for so long for that lodge, and it has made a difference. There's no doubt about it. And you get paid your master's wages because they ought be due you.
Yeah.
It is such a moment for that brother internally when he gets recognized by his peers. He's like, you know what? This is totally worth it. Sure. What's next? What can I do now?
At the end of the day, we are our brother's keepers. And so for so long, especially if you grew up in a lodge, I mean, Arlington raised me in every way that a lodge can raise somebody. I went into that lodge, 23 years old, 23 years old, fresh out of college, right? Naturally, I knew everything. I have a piece of paper that says I am smarter than everybody.
Yeah.
but seriously though, I mean, a young guy, I came in a lodge and I was raised a master in that lodge and I was immediately put to work. And I can't thank, past master Steve Shipe, so mote it be, for appointing me to a role right away. And I attribute any success or honors I've received in Masonry because of that. I was immediately put in the quarries, set to work, and it allowed me the opportunity to meet the guys in the lodge. Because, man, when you're a junior steward, you are the first to show up and the last one to leave. So, in Arlington, we do meals for everything. So I was there all the time, but it gave me an opportunity to meet people, and they got to meet me, and they got comfortable with me. And because of that, I was able to continue on the journey. But, we are our brother's keeper. And for the last 6 years, serving the lodge in my role, whatever that may be. And then my turn came to really serve the lodge and serve the brethren and lead them for a year. And so to get those comments from the very people that you have served for so long, it truly is it's an experience I'll never forget. I'll never forget every man that was in that room, and I'll never forget the comments that were spoken. At least not willingly. Hopefully I'll never forget them. But to the second part of that question, the saddest moment was obviously when I had to turn over the lodge to Worshipful Master Gary Blair, who, first of all, I was very honored that Gary was elected to be the Worshipful Master of our lodge. I have a tremendous amount of respect for Gary, for what he does as a Mason and for who he is as a man. He's got a beautiful family, and he does a great job for himself and for his family. And so I'm very proud that he's going to be leading our lodge. I think he's going to do a tremendous job. But, he packed the house. Now, Billy was there. He packed the house, didn't he, Billy?
Yeah, it was amazing, actually. Not only was every seat filled, they had to bring in folding chairs from outside the lodge room to fit everybody into the lodge room.
Our lodge seats 158 people.
Yeah, I was going to say.
We had to bring in folding chairs.
That's no small lodge room over there.
So, but, so it packed out. He packed it out and everything. And so.
It was impressive.
It was. So I kind of said a few words thanking everybody for it. And the saddest part was just knowing that it was over. And my eyes just kind of couldn't help being drawn to the part of the wall where my picture was going to hang, just because, you know where the last spot is on the wall. And I just kind of couldn't help but stare over there. And it just kind of rang in my mind that forever in perpetuity, I would be here in Lodge, and that one day there'd be a whole nother row of pictures underneath me. And one day there'll be a black ribbon on that frame. And all these thoughts just kind of run through your mind. And it was it was kind of leveling. It was very sad. Something that you had in your sights for what seemed like, well, not seemed like, for your entire Masonic career.
Yeah.
And it had come and it had gone. And, now it was time to give everything and give all your best and give all your energy to the next Worshipful Master. And so while that was a great day, I'm not complaining. There was a bit of sadness, and I even joked. I was sitting with somebody and I said, how's it feel, sitting over here? And I said, I'm not going to lie. I said, seeing Gary sit up there in that chair and that hat, I said, I kind of feel like somebody's touching my girlfriend right now. I said, that's not right, dude. I'm sitting over here, you're sitting up there. That's not right. So
that's awesome.
There becomes a little bit of a possessive thing, and not in a selfish way, but and maybe it's just for me because I've heard comments, I couldn't wait for my year to be over, but man, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed getting to be a part of that lodge, but more specifically getting to be the face of that lodge and the custodian of that lodge that I love so much. And so it was very, very bittersweet. And at the time, it was definitely more bitter than it was sweet. It's getting sweeter as the days go on. I do still get copied on some of the emails, and that makes it much sweeter knowing that they're not waiting for my response.
That's greatness.
It's budget time of the year, so I'm real kind of, that makes it much sweeter.
No, I know what you mean. You get kind of withdrawals because you're right in the middle of it, but there's so much a past master has to offer his lodge.
So when we talked to you last year, you said that your primary leadership style has always been diplomatic. Has that changed or evolved in any way?
Well, I wouldn't say it's changed. I mean, it may have evolved in the sense that I might be a little better at being a diplomat, but my leadership style will always be diplomatic, and I'll tell you why. Because everybody's opinion is important, and everybody's point of view is valid. So if somebody comes to me with an issue and they're having an issue with somebody else, my first instinct is to try to put myself in their situation and try to see things from their point of view. I've always been gifted with the ability to suspend my personal beliefs and entertain somebody else's viewpoints. And that's very handy in any kind of a leadership position or even in just everyday life. It helps you avoid a lot of confrontations. But one thing it has helped me being master this year or past last year, I've really kind of had to hone those skills a little bit because, as lodges have different personalities within the lodge. So a lodge can have 4 or 5 different personalities depending on who you're talking to. And personality B is not meshing with personality D, and they're coming to you. So you don't want to take a hard stance, and because you don't want to alienate a part of your lodge, especially if it's a part of your lodge that is always working and doing a good job for the lodge. You don't want to invalidate their opinion or invalidate their feelings. So if you can put yourself in their situation, understand where they're arguing from, it allows you moving forward to really handle the situation that's going to appease everybody. And in my opinion, that's the Worshipful Master's job, is to find the medium in every situation, because above all else, before the budget can be balanced, before a bill can be paid, peace and harmony has to prevail. And if it doesn't, I don't care how many masters you've raised, I don't care how many pennies you saved, you failed. If your lodge, when you leave it, is not in harmony, you failed. That's priority number one. So my leadership strategy has not changed, but it has definitely gotten better. Being worship master of a lodge, particularly a busy lodge, you have had to hone your skills in pleasing 2 sides of an issue.
So true.
Last year when we talked to you, you said you wanted to focus more on fundraising. Specifically, to have a better idea of what you wanted to fundraise for and have a better idea of how to fundraise for that thing. Be very directed in your intent. And you said you wanted to build a big wooden deck to go, hang out and have cookouts on and smoke cigars and have drinks. How is that progressing? Did you guys go forward with that? Is that something that you are succeeding on, or is that something that you decided not to go forward with?
Well, short answer, we did not do that. Short answer. Now we can go into the explanation. We had our sights set on several different fundraising projects. Unfortunately, almost none of them came to fruition because my chief fundraisers each of them had their own medical issues. And so I lost a lot of steam. They were kind of the spearheads of it all. And I lost a lot of steam. And with all the other things we had going on, it was just a little too cumbersome to try to stop that, pick this ball up, which was rather heavy. And then, so we just said, you know what? Kind of set that aside. We still had our target fundraisers that we needed to focus on, like our golf tournament for our foundation. That had to be done, and that had to take precedent over any kind of, fundraising we wanted to do for extra things. Because, bottom line, we give out, I don't know, $20,000 or something in scholarships. And so that money's got to be there. So we kind of suspended our attention on the extra things and just started focusing on the fundraising that we needed to fund our projects. Now, are we going to get back to that? I don't know if we will. We looked at some various quotes, and it would have been rather pricey to do it. And I just don't know, as the year went on, we discussed different scenarios. Don't know if it would have been something we really needed to do in order to utilize that. I don't think we need to build a permanent structure. We could just put up, on our own, some of those canopy structures with like the wooden poles and the strung canopies and things like that. Like you see on a lot of the outdoor patios around town. We could do something like that much more cost effective really it's quite in style and functional as opposed to building a permanent structure. We were going to get away from a wooden deck and do a paved slab and then have steel beams and an awning and everything. And so that kind of project would really require quite a bit of funding. And I just don't know if it's necessary for what we would use it for. So we just decided that particular project, we'll just kind of set it off to the side, like far to the side, and look at other possibilities down the road.
Well, what a great example of the master listening to the will of the lodge.
I appreciate that.
Well, I mean, because you're right. You've got a grandiose idea. And the nucleus of the idea is still great, but maybe the expenditures of it could be tightened up with a little wisdom.
And maybe we just decide to go a different direction altogether.
Yep.
But like I said, we had the idea, and I had the idea. It was something that I wanted to do for the lodge. And then as we got to exploring it more and more, we saw that a lot of our fundraising efforts were not going to be what they hoped they would be because of some very principal figures that just unfortunately were not going to be able to fulfill that role. And so, we needed to set it aside, focus on what we absolutely have to do. And our golf tournament was a great success. And we're expanding on that thing, and we're expecting it to be much bigger next year. But, when you consider that this is only the second year we've done it, and we netted out, about $15,000. And that's after it's all said and done.
Nice.
Yeah, we bubblegummed it together the best we could. We cut expenses and stuff like that. But next year, we're hoping to kind of bring up the quality a little bit now that we've got some experience and know-how under our belt. Put a little bit of money into the tournament, the goodie bags, the prizes. I don't know if you guys are golfers at all, but we plan on doing putting contest for a Scotty Cameron putter. That's a $500 putter anywhere you go. Like a short hole contest for a set of Titleist irons. That's about $1,200 worth of golf clubs. So, things like that. We've been able to get some relationships with suppliers that we can get these items at cost. So, we want to put more into it. We want to make the tournament more enjoyable for the people who are attending. And because when people are having a good time, they spend more money.
No, I think that's a great point. I mean, because, any lodge that's thinking about doing a fundraiser, they got to realize their first year is not going to be the wham bam out of the park.
Absolutely.
It's a progressive deal.
No, and that's with anything. I mean, if you think Susan G. Komen's first 5K blocked off, all of North Park and off of 75 in North Dallas, buddy, you're delusional.
Yeah.
I mean, everything starts off at a crawl. Susan G. started off doing a fun run in a park for free. Now it is the largest national 5K that there is. I mean, there's like 3 different Susan G. Komen races in like every major city in the United States. I mean, it's absolutely enormous. But but you're right. That's the point. You've got to just have a plan, have a vision, and start with one goal. Make money. If you make $1, you did good the first year.
You got it.
Cover your expenses. So, like I said, we did that the first year and then some. We hit a home run the first year. And then we stepped up the next year, and we didn't do quite as good as we did the first year, believe it or not, but we still did very good. But, all these things we take moving forward, and we plan on making it something we do every year, making it bigger, making it better. And as we make it bigger and better, it gets more expensive. And people will play in something that's more expensive if they're getting value from it. My company, we play in the Meals on Wheels golf tournament every year. It's $1,500 for a foursome. $1,500. Okay.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's played at Ridgely Country Club. They put a great spread out for breakfast. They do a great spread for lunch. In the goodies bags is, Bose speakers and stuff like that. I mean, but you know what I'm saying? There's value there. People don't mind spending their corporate money because they need the write-offs anyway. But they know that they're going to have a good time. They're going to play a good course. There's value. So we just got to, as every year, we got to just make sure we up the value a little bit.
But and personally, I think that's something important that every lodge and every officer needs to think about. What's the value proposition that you're offering to people? Why should they come to your event? Why should they be interested in what you have? What are you offering them in return?
Absolutely. I mean, Masons aren't selfish, but guys, we give a tremendous amount of our time, our personal time, our family time, our professional time to this craft. And we are deluding ourselves if we don't think that a brother goes, what's in it for me? He's got to ask himself that. If he's going to leave his family, leave his family early one evening or take off from work to go to an event, what's in it for me? Why should I do these things? And if you don't have an answer to that question, frankly, you don't deserve his attendance.
Yeah.
If you don't have an answer to what's in it for me, then you don't deserve my time. They don't deserve your time or anybody else's time. But we have got to get out of this mentality that it's okay to waste time. It's not.
No, they'll walk for that quicker than anything nowadays.
Well, and everybody wants to get on the millennials. How can we talk to the millennials? How can we do this? How can we do that? Guys, I'm going to tell you this right now. Gabe, you and I, we're right there, right? Millennials. Whoop.
Yep.
Let me tell you what a millennial doesn't have. They don't have time to waste. Period. Okay? They are coming out of school in a very fast-paced world, exceptionally in debt, and they are trying to start a life. They are hitting the ground running. This world moves faster every single day, and they are hitting the ground running. Now, studies have shown that millennials are philanthropic, and they want to get behind a cause. In a recent study, it is shown that 83% of millennials would take a job making less money if it was for a company that supported a cause they believed in. That's an impressive statistic that you would take less money to work for a company because they give their money to charity or whatever. Millennials have a tremendous sense of humanitarian effort, and they have a tremendous sense, of pride in humanitarian effort. So they can be Masons and they want to be. But if you're expecting a 25-year-old kid who's up to his eyeballs in debt, trying to get a master's degree, if you're expecting him to sit in a lodge for 2 hours while you argue about how high a head should be, guys, he's gone. It's just not going to happen.
Did you say how high a hedge should be? That sounds oddly specific. I shan't probe you on that one.
Confirm or deny if that is a real life scenario.
No, and I think I've told this story before on the podcast once. But a buddy of mine related a story to me about his son. His son got initiated at a lodge, location undisclosed. And this lodge was arguing about reimbursing a fellow for the sum of, I believe, $2 or so. I remember thinking that it was less than a handful of dollars. It was pocket change.
It was a very trivial amount.
Yeah, it was literally pocket change. And they were arguing about how to do it, or how, I can't remember if it was how to do it or if they should do it or what, right? And he ended up not doing this, but he came back home and he told his dad, man, I just wanted to stand up and tell them, I have $2 in my hand right now and I will give it to this person. But he was brand new. I think it was the first stated meeting after his EA degree. And so he didn't feel like he could, right? Yeah. But it's just one of those things that I'm like, man, how are we, this is a guy who's brand new to the craft and we're going to sour him to the tune of 200 cents.
Right.
Man, that's screwed up.
When you say it like that, it sounds like a lot.
That's because it's a lot of pennies.
Sure.
200 old
so
cents.
Hmm.
what is something that you wish you'd done differently this year?
Huh. That's a good question.
Cue the Jeopardy music.
Yeah, I mean, guys, I'll be honest. I mean, I'd really have to examine the year case by case. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything, and the reason for that is because, I had such a great support group, and I'm not giving that answer as a cop-out by any means. Hear me out. I had such a tremendous support group that all the usual events that we have every year, and we have a lot, they were already planned, cared for. People were coming to me with the answers instead of the questions, which makes things tremendously easy for me in terms of making an executive decision, right? Instead of saying, well, how did we do it last year? Let's just do it that way. People were taking the initiative to come to me, say, here's how we're going to do it, here's the plan, and so forth. And so as the year unfolded and the events happened, things went off without a hitch. For the sake of time, I mean, I'm sure if I just sat here and, like I said, really examined the year case by case, I could probably come up with something. But the year was nearly perfect. The only things that weren't perfect were the things that I couldn't control. One thing, I mean, right off the bat, I wish would be different was, the man who's one of the most influential people in my life, certainly the biggest influencer in me becoming a Mason. He let me marry his daughter. That was pretty nice of him. But John Gauze, who was my senior warden this year, he had quite a bit of health issues last year, and then they kind of sprung up a little bit this year. And so John just kind of had to take a hard look inside, and he made the decision that it was for the best health-wise just to kind of step away from Masonry for a little while and focus a little bit of his energy on himself for a change. And he did that. John's doing very well. He's very healthy, and I still see him all the time because, again, I'm married to his daughter and all that stuff. But And this is I'm going to preface this with this very selfish, but I wish he could have been there more during this year, just because of all the work and the time that he's put into my Masonic career and talking with me. And we've kind of been each other's sounding board when it comes to the lodge, various issues and things like that. And so for him to sit in the West in the year that I sat in the East, and for us to have that relationship, and for him to just be there for what up to this point has been the greatest honor of my personal life, certainly the biggest honor of my Masonic life, just to be there and share that experience with me. It's very regrettable that it just didn't work out that way. And that's nobody's fault. It is what it is. The designs on the trestle board are what they are, but that doesn't mean we have to like them. So that's probably the biggest, well, it's not probably, it is the biggest regrettable thing about the year. Is I just wish the person who was probably the most influential in my Masonic career could have been there in that role, to be my right hand and to be somebody that would help govern the craft, for lack of a better term.
Right on. What's on the horizon for you in your Masonic career? What's coming up?
Well, what's coming up in the near future is July the 23rd at beautiful Arlington Masonic Lodge, number 438. I'll be elected and installed as the president of the Masters, Wards, and Secretaries Association for the 64th District.
Sweet.
Congratulations.
Yeah, very much looking forward to that. That association has a great history. It's got a great membership. It's kind of, I'm not going to say it's went dormant, but it's kind of taken some step backs in terms of district activity in the last years. And, our officers, Jason this year, Patrick before him, they did a great job. I mean, really, if it wasn't for them, the association might have went away for a little while. I mean, they really kind of stepped up. There were some vacancies, and they stepped up, and they just kind of took charge of the thing. So they have my thanks, they have my applause, and they've really got some traction on these tires. But now we have got a really stacked lineup of officers that are just dynamic Masons. Mark Myers will be vice president. Greg Wright, y'all probably know him. He'll be the secretary. And
he sounds familiar.
Yeah. Well, he's 148, I
think. I've heard of him.
Yeah, but and then there's a couple of people who are making themselves available for treasurer. It's a 4-year line, so treasurer, secretary, VP, president. And so the two that I know for sure is, I believe, Nicholas Runyon and Bruce Hammond.
Oh, cool.
So whichever one of those guys becomes treasurer, they will just add to what's going to be a dynamic lineup. So, but there's a lot of controversy surrounding the MWSA right now. The biggest wedge in the association is the stock show booth, and you guys have probably heard about it or talked about it. But
oh yes,
for a number of
give
years,
our listeners the breakdown though.
I'm sorry.
Give our listeners the breakdown though.
Well, it's just for a number of years there's been a should we, shouldn't we do the stock show booth? Masons of 64th District for I think it goes back 15 years or so, maybe even longer. But we've had a booth at the annual stock show in Fort Worth, and so, but for the last couple of years, it's been a real task getting Masons to sign up to man the booth. And per the stock show rules, that booth has to be manned at all times. And the stock show goes on for, 2 weeks, 2-3 weeks? I mean, it goes on for a while. So it's
2 weeks.
It's becoming more of a taxing task to get Masons to voluntarily man this booth. And what we've been getting is the last couple of years, it's been getting worse. People not showing up at all, losing the passes, so on and so forth. But this really boils down to a simple thing. There's not an interest district-wide in doing this. And the Masons of the district are making it known by not participating. And so, again, there's just been this struggle in the association. Should we, shouldn't we continue to do the booth? It is not a free booth. It is a considerable amount of money. Now, the pro is that we do get a lot of exposure doing it. And people do enjoy, stopping, checking out the booth, talking to the Masons and so forth. But the question keeps coming up is, what's the return on investment? And not just return on investment in terms of money, but what's the return on investment in terms of time? When you need 2 people to man the booth in like 2 or 3 shifts a day for the course of 2 weeks, how many man hours is that? That's a tremendous amount of personal commitment. And are we getting a return on that? So there's been this struggle. And I believe that the district as a whole doesn't want the stock show booth. That's what I'm hearing. Okay, and I'm not speaking personally. That's just what I'm hearing. If you're not familiar with how the MWSA is set up, the only voting members are the officers of the association, past presidents of the association, and current Worshipful Master, Senior Junior Warden, and Secretary of a lodge in the 64th District. So those are the only guys who can vote. And I believe that we've kept the stock show booth for the last couple of years purely on the fact that people who don't want the booth are not showing up to the association meetings to voice their opinion or vote if they can vote.
Yeah.
And so, again, my opinion as to why that's continuing. I am not, I have tried to abstain from, especially since I'm going to be the president, I think it's appropriate that I keep a level of neutrality. I do believe that there's benefits to the stock show booth. I do believe that the Masons of this district are showing us year after year they are getting less interested in doing it. And this association, at the end of the day, is purely to serve the Masons of the district. And if we're continuing to do something that the Masons of the district don't want to do, we're not serving them. So, but to them I say, Masons of the 64th district, if you do want the stock show booth, you need to come up and talk to us about it at the meetings. If you don't want the stock show booth, you need to show up to the meetings. So I spoke to Arlington about it at our last dated meeting that, 8 or 10 guys are making all the decisions for the 64th district. Because that's, between 10 and 20 votes. That's how many we get at an average meeting. They're making the decisions for the district. That, in my opinion, is not right.
No, it's the
not
truth.
our fault if you don't show up to vote. You don't show up to vote. But if you can vote, or if you have an opinion, you need to be at the MWSA and you need to voice that opinion. You need to make your feelings known in this district. Otherwise, how else can we serve you? If we don't know what you want, how can we do what you want?
Yeah, because they've got to understand when we sign up for that booth and nobody goes to man it, it's counterproductive for our fraternity.
It looks bad.
Yeah.
When, we've had a couple of those times last year with an empty booth. That looks 3 times as bad as a manned booth looks good.
Oh yeah, I mean it's way worse than the old dilapidated lodges we have that nobody's ever at. It's an empty booth. It's like, oh wow.
Right. That's what I'm saying. In the court of public opinion,
yes,
a manned booth, or let's just say an unmanned booth counts 3 times to every manned booth.
Yeah.
So that's my thing about the MWSA. Now, I will say to people who don't know what MWSA is, it is an association that's designed to be a common meeting place for the leaders of the lodges. So the masters, wardens, secretaries, and all those who hope to be one of those things one day, you need to come to the Masters, Wardens, and Secretaries Association because it's in those meetings that we're able to look at problems that lodges are having and come up with constructive ways of solving them. The district deputies are instrumental in being a part of the NWSA. So if you've got an issue, you can bring it up to the association, and one or all of the district deputies that are there can help you in your lodge solve that problem. We always have a good speaker who's going to speak on a very relevant topic about masonry. So if you are a leader or want to be a leader of your lodge, you need to be a part of the MWSA. That association is there for you, and we want to help you. You've just got to tell us which direction to steer the boat. If you don't, then you are stuck on the path we put you on, and that's not right.
No, and I think about all the times, and because so many lodges in Tarrant County had Grand Lodge officers, because now we have 31 lodges, which means that's 93 votes per lodge, plus all of our past masters. That's a lot of sway at Grand Lodge on what gets passed and who gets voted in.
Absolutely.
And we can all get on the same page at that MWSA, or at least understand what we're, all working for.
Absolutely. And that's the biggest thing, is that a lot of the conflicts that arise throughout the district are purely a product of misunderstanding. And if we could have a place like the MWSA hatch out these ideas, then we're all on the same page. It's not, well, so-and-so told me so-and-so, right? And I disagree with that. Well, that's where we can come together and we can address these issues together. And if your lodge is having a problem, bring it up. Let's talk about it in the association. If it's maybe a law problem, we've got district deputies, former district deputies, Grand Lodge officers. Ken Curry, Right Worshipful Grand Junior Warden, is a past president of that association. So, there's a lot of knowledge and experience and leadership in those meetings that the leaders of the lodge in this district need to take advantage of, because it's there.
Case in point, right now, our redistricting that's going on in the whole state of Texas. I know the proposed thing they have for Tarrant County, not many lodges like, and we should be discussing that there at the MWSA, getting our plan together as a district. So we know, here's plan A, here's plan B, if that doesn't happen, and we can all vote what's best for our district.
That's right. Masons of 64 really need to understand and appreciate that this is a powerhouse district. And in terms of powerhouse, this is like, if you take it like a national voting, 64th district is like in LA or in Chicago.
Yeah.
It carries, it's one of the largest districts in the state.
Yeah.
And it carries a lot of voting power. And so if you're a Mason of the 64th district and you don't know that, then now you know. So have some pride, because, like I said, the 64th district is a serious district. There's a reason why anybody who's running for the Grand South, they tend to make a lot of events in the 64th and 14th district.
Yeah. No, absolutely. We're right next door, and we're huge. Because you're right. Dallas is bigger. San Antonio, Houston's bigger. Austin's comparable, but we're bigger. So we're we're definitely in the top 5.
Well, I thought it was Right Worshipful Brunk that posted a stat by voting Masons. 64th district was like second or third by voting Masons.
That wouldn't surprise me.
Because, especially in terms of a grand level, it doesn't matter how many dues cards you've got floating out there. How many of those can vote?
That's the truth. And how many show up to vote?
That too.
No,
I know for sure 64th district had the second largest turnout at the 2018 communication.
I was talking to my dad about the stock show booth. I was like, we need to take that money and rent vans and get every past master from the 64th down to Grand Lodge.
That's not a bad idea. But there's a lot of ideas about how to reappropriate those funds. One is having a district-wide gala that the MWSA hosts and inviting all the Masons and their wives and just having a great fraternal time. We have a nice dinner, a band, good food, good time. And every year, that's the end. You don't want to miss it. That's the annual MWSA dinner. That's the best dinner of the year.
Dang, I liked it, because we had our first black tie event, and I was not a black tie guy until that. That was just fun to get gussied up with the wife and all of our friends, looking good, taking pictures.
Yeah. You know who loves those events? Wives.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we don't have enough of those things, guys, because for every one of those events we take our wives to, we get like 10 free passes.
Yeah,
right?
that's the truth.
So, I mean, think about it. I mean, we all travel a lot, guys. I mean, we got, Grand Lodge weekends, Scottish Rite Convocation weekend, Grand Commander, Grand Chapter Council. I mean, we go out and play a lot, okay? Not to mention all the regular duties that we have in our home districts. So it's like the more events that we can let the wives go and buy a new dress for and all this stuff, we get a lot of mileage out of that. So it's kind of a selfish reason that we need to be looking at these things.
No, he's scratching back, man. That's how you get your back scratched.
That's right. Like, I know my wife, she knows all the usual dinners. And she'll go, which one is this? I'll say it's a such and such. Oh, right. I say, oh, it's a such and such. She go, oh, right. Yeah.
And look, I know my lodge at 148 hasn't been active in it, but I am really impressed with what the 14th district has done with their MWSA and how it's kind of coagulated things.
Oh, theirs is fabulous. Those officers, Jeff Haven, Chris Livingston, Kyle Walquist, they've done a great job. And it's not just them. I mean, that ball has been rolling for a while.
Yeah.
And the thing is that they meet every month. They meet once a month, and the attendance at theirs is outstanding. I love going to visit. They have excitement. They get great presentations. They're a great association. So I have nothing but respect and jealousy of the 14th District's MWSA, and because they've earned the respect and they've earned the jealousy. They do a great job.
Yeah, and it's just really reminded me of how important it could be for us. And it's going to take all of our lodges. So,
absolutely.
I've been preaching to our guys, that we've got to get at least one delegate over there, to these meetings, because we meet every Monday. Come hell or high water, there's somebody at 148 to meet candidates or something every single Monday. And it being fourth Mondays that MWSA meets, we're getting good at planning for that now.
Well, I know me and the other officers like Mark and Greg, we've already talked about it, and we've committed that, we all served as Worshipful Master this last year. So, in fact, our whole line did. Jason, myself, Mark, and Greg, we were all Worshipful Masters.
That's right, yeah.
So it was a little hectic, but, our year's behind us, so we can take a little bit more of a support role in the lodge as opposed to a leadership role. And I said, guys, we need to be visiting the lodge in the district purely on behalf of the MWSA. There to talk about MWSA, there to represent MWSA, invite people to MWSA, educate them about MWSA. And you notice how many times I just said the word MWSA? You can't say it too many times when you're going out to visit. Yeah. Because I think a lot of people just forget. We only meet 4 times a year, and once of those is to turn over the reins. So,
yeah.
You know what I mean? We've got to get more familiarity. I'm okay with meeting quarterly, but by God, when we meet, there's got to be a good program. We have got to have good turnouts. So, we've got to get out there. We've got to be the face in the district. We've got to be the guys banging the drum.
Yeah, and I'm totally with you. Quarterly is perfect. Until we get the interest going again, then quarterly's great. Maybe in a couple of years we'll vote to meet bi-monthly, and then another few years monthly. But right now,
yeah, and just see where it goes.
Yeah,
because I know. Hey, we all need another meeting a month, like a hole in the head. I know.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I get it.
Yeah.
So, I kind of had another question here. What are the challenges that Arlington Lodge will be facing, and what are your hopes for the immediate, short-term, and long-term future of Arlington Lodge?
So when you say the challenges that we'll be facing, do you mean that in the short term?
Just like what are your immediate challenges going to be? What are your short-term challenges going to be? And what are your long-term challenges going to be? Like, 1 year, 5 year, 10 plus.
I'll tell you one thing for sure is definitely a short term is that this is not a problem by any means. It's just something that we need to keep in mind as we're moving forward. But our lodge is very young, and that's a great thing. Okay, that is a great thing. The only issue with it is that a lot of the older, the mentors seems like they're taking and which is great, but they're taking kind of a step back and letting the younger guys like myself and the younger guys kind of step up. But it could be an issue if those older guys kind of choose to fade away more regularly, if that makes sense. Because, I was as successful as I was because I always had the guys I knew and trusted, the steady eddies, to kind of keep me in my lane and train me and groom me to advance as an officer in the lodge. And I hope we continue to travel down that path. If we don't, we could see, in the next 3 or 4 years, we could see guys in, leadership positions with very little leadership training from the guys who are, good at that kind of thing, from the guys who have brought up a lot of worshipful masters and encouraged a lot of worshipful masters and kind of given them their tips of the trade along the way. So if that continues, that'll be a good thing for Arlington. If it doesn't, we could see ourselves in a position with some inexperienced, a line of inexperienced officers, and not by any fault of their own. But if the leadership takes a back seat, then it could become an issue in the short term. Now, in the long term, obviously, the biggest long-term problem for a lodge that size is always going to be financial. We have a tremendous amount of building maintenance, land maintenance. We've got to have the biggest lodge, and I don't know this. I mean, we've got to have the biggest lodge in the 64 in terms of building and land maintenance. Because, Arlington has all that land it sits on, and then we've got that big old building, which is comparable to a Tarrant Lodge. So, I don't know how much of that land they have, but their building's about the same size of ours, and we have all that land. So, it's an expensive thing to keep up. And just like every other lodge, we have trouble paying our bills with the money that we bring in. Now, we have good investments, and we're blessed in that sense. But we're having trouble making ends meet just off of the dues that we bring, which means we have to feed off investments, which you don't want to do. So a long-term struggle for Arlington is the same long-term struggle that a lot of lodges have. How do we fund ourselves in perpetuity? How do we continue to grow and keep a financial comfort for the next 50 years, 100 years? As the cost of living and maintenance continues to go up, but dues are not matching that progression, how can we survive? So that is absolutely troubling for me, and as it should be for you guys. I think it should be troubling for all Masons who are under the age of 40. Because, Brad Billings and I, we were having breakfast one morning, I think it was at the Shrine thing, and we were just kind of talking about that very thing, about funding Masonry in perpetuity and where that's going to come from. And there's some troubling things for the future if we don't take care of them now. The question, like we joked, is, if we're not careful, whose house are we going to store all those pictures at in Grand Lodge? In 40 or 50 years when we don't have a wall to hang them on anymore.
Yeah.
So, we joked about that, but that's a very serious concern for people who are under the age of 40. I have every intention of being very active in this fraternity for the next 40 or 50 years. I'm 30 years old right now. So I have every intention of being very active in this fraternity for another 40 or 50 years. So the mentality that you might see in Masonry from some of the older brothers is that, well, this is the way I like it, and it's not exactly going to be my problem anyway, so why rock the boat?
Yeah.
Well, for us younger guys, that's a very troubling mentality. So, not to get off topic of the question, but for me, a long-term worry for Arlington is very much that thing. In 40 or 50 years, what is that building going to look like? What's the, that dynamic in the ownership structure going to be? Are we still going to own that building, or we can have to sell that building? or sell the land. How are we going to fund this lodge in Arlington in perpetuity?
No, I think that issue probably touches almost every single lodge in the state of Texas.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. And I don't know, maybe y'all could educate me. I don't know how it affects you guys or the lodges that meet at the temple. I have a very small understanding of the fee structure and everything, and I don't want to go into all that, but like 148, you guys have a home there in the temple, and the temple is doing pretty well. I mean, obviously it's not ironclad, but it's doing well.
Yeah.
How do you guys, how does that problem fit in with your guys' mentality?
Well, because the thing, just like every lodge we struggled with, we had a huge gap. It was young guys, half old guys. And so when it came to raising the dues, how do you do that? Because you've got a lot of endowments and stuff like that. Well, we pushed the dues up finally to $365 a year.
Yeah, Greg was talking about that. The $1 a day. I like that.
We are very, very proactive on the guys that are older that we know are on what we call a fixed income, Social Security, whatever it is, and having them understand that if they can contribute the amount to pay for Grand Lodge and what it costs to be at the temple, we're good to go, which usually amounts to about $70. Here's our dues, but if you can't afford them, here's what you could pay to help out. So we get a lot of that, but the young guys pay the dues, the $365. So as we start growing more and more members, in the next probably 8 years, we will come off of depending on our trust fund because we're in the same boat. We couldn't survive without it. We could get close, but we couldn't do the things we wanted to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a real precarious thing to kind of build yourself up to the future for that, because then you had, when we raised dues, we had a faction of guys that were younger, that were used to paying low dues, that was like, hey, wait a minute, I don't want to pay $365.
Mm-hmm.
So to kind of ease that blow, we left the $500 endowment for like 8 months and said, hey, here's your option, which doesn't help us out a lot, but we weren't in a goal of losing membership. We were looking way long term. So in 10 years, everybody knows, the endowment now is $3,700. This is what the due structure is, and it becomes normal to them. And we can survive for that long. We're not chewing on our endowment that bad.
Yeah. So what about the building itself?
So the building itself, we pay $35 a member, which they are, now that we've got rid of the ad valorem tax, we're holding on, but we don't have the funds for maintenance. So we kind of pass the hat for that. So again, we're in the same boat because if we talk about raising dues, there's some large bodies there that say, hey, we couldn't afford it. We're going to have to leave. And if they left, it would be devastating. We couldn't afford that temple itself. So it's no different than any other lodge. It's just on a little bit bigger scale because we've got leaks in the roof. There's always something that's got to be fixed, Yep.
Well.
All right. Well, gentlemen, it's been a pretty good discussion. It's been a long discussion.
Doesn't seem like it. It's gone by just like that.
I know.
It does.
I didn't realize we'd been going so long until I looked at the recording clock. But the last time that we had Corey on the show, we had a Teddy Roosevelt quote. So we're going to have another one. Greatness means strife for nation and man alike. A soft, easy life is not worth living if it impairs the fiber of brain and heart and muscle. We must dare to be great, and we must realize that greatness is the fruit of toil and sacrifice and high courage. We are face to face with our destiny, and we must meet it with a high and resolute courage. For us is the life of action, of strenuous performance of duty. Let us live in the harness, striving mightily. Let us rather run the risk of wearing out than rusting out. And that is a quote by Brother Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th President of the United States of America, in his 1898 opening gubernatorial campaign speech in New York City.
He was such an animal.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, that guy, he's a man's man. I mean,
Yeah.
plain and simple.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'll go right here and say, dude, Teddy Roosevelt's my man.
He's
Plain and simple.
fantastic. So if just that kitchen's falling apart.
It's about to.
So if we can get Rhit, Billy, and then myself for closing thoughts, and then we'll let Corey have the floor.
Oh, wow. For what?
So closing thoughts for me about this episode, I think really and truly it is just to, embrace your lodge. It's all part of the process of self-growth. If you don't have a good lodge and a good environment to grow yourself as a person, masonry's not going to be worth as much. And as hard as it may be to realize you may have to pick up and leave to another lodge, that's what it may have to be. Or you may have to roll up your sleeves and create what you want in your own lodge and start building those bonds between your brothers like they should be. So when you guys do something and somebody pats you on the back, it means something more to you because that's what's going to perpetuate that along, So either build your lodge up to what it needs to be. If it's not, if it is, get in the middle of it or start visiting. It's crucial. Billy, your turn.
All right. So yeah, I thanks Corey for coming on the show. I have to say, I guess I'm kind of the new guy around here, but I've been really impressed by what I've seen. The way you carry yourself as a leader and your lodge itself, right? I think you have a lot of good programs going on. You have a lot of great brothers that are helping out. You have a lot of great programs. So I love going to Arlington Lodge. It's always an interesting event, and it's an event, right? And that's the important thing that I think we miss at a lot of lodges is that we don't view our meetings as events. But I always think of Arlington's as being one of those. And I would like to see that emulated a lot more across the board, So, great job. And I look forward to, seeing what you move on to next.
And so, Corey, one of the things I wanted to say is that as a younger guy who got into the craft a little bit earlier than I did and who has already taken kind of the deep dive into a lot of the leadership roles, you've been kind of one of the several role models that I have, but you're a very good example of what it is to be a younger guy who is just very active in the craft. And I'm very happy that I got involved with, Scottish Rite and the York Rite, because I don't know that we would necessarily have interacted all that much if I hadn't started, showing up to Scottish Rite stuff. But, thank you for what you're doing in Tarrant County, and I am excited to see what further adventures you get into. So if you would like to have the floor and leave our listeners with some closing thoughts, go for it.
Yeah, I'd be happy to, Gabe. But first, I want to thank you for the comments. It really means a lot. And I hope that, in the various activities that I do in the district and some of the leadership roles that I take, I do hope to be an inspiration to some of the younger guys, because sometimes Masonry can be a little bit of an old boys club. And if there are young, strong guys who want to be leaders in Masonry, you can be. And it's not because, Corey did it. No, there are a lot of examples of guys who are just dynamic Masons. I mean, I think we are all very personal friends with one, Brad Billings, who's an inspiration to me. I learn a lot from Brad, and Brad's helped me out a lot. And so there's a lot of guys that young Masons can look at right here in our district, 14th district, all over North Texas, and look at them and say, Masonry is not just an old boys club. Young guys can take leadership positions and they can do the job well. They can be the the motion of change in Masonry for the better. So I really appreciate you saying that. I'm honored to even be that a little bit for you. And Gabe, obviously, if there's anything you ever need, just ask. If it's within my power, I'd be happy to help. But in a bit of closing thought, I do want to thank you guys for having me on. It is an absolute pleasure just to have somebody ask me a question, and the idea that my thoughts are worth 2 cents. So I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to give my 2 cents. I love Masonry. I love Masonry in Texas. I'm not a Texan. I was born in New Orleans, but by this time in my life, I've lived in Texas for like 17 years, so I think it's pretty well set in. But I love Texas Masonry. It's been the best thing I've ever done in my life up to this point, and I sincerely thank anybody who's listening to this podcast who's had even the slightest impression on my Masonic career. I thank you, and I don't take it for granted. Thank you for the encouragement. For the members of Arlington Lodge, I really want to thank them for their encouragement and their well wishes throughout the last year. And I wish you all the best at 148. Maybe, just maybe one day, y'all could be as good as 438.
It's greatness. Well, I have
thoroughly
enjoyed the conversation, no doubt.
As have I.
All right. So, folks, if you want to know more, you can find us at www.fortworth148.org. We are at Fort Worth Lodge 148 on Facebook. Our email is info148@fortworth148.org. If you live in the 64th District of the Grand Lodge of Texas and you want to promote an event, please reach out to them at 64th.org. That's 64th.org. We're putting on a big educational event with a lot of speakers. We're calling it Texas Masonicon. You can find it at www.texasmasonicon.com. That's texasmasonicon.com. We are Texas Masonicon on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. This event is taking place on September 15th. That's a Saturday. It's going to be all day. You can pre-order tickets for $45 until August 15th, and then they go to the door price of $55. And we have the full run of the temple that day. So we're going to be using all the rooms of the temple. And we've got a great host of speakers. So,
yes.
Yep. So
that's right. Only 1 month left at that rate.
Oh, God. Yeah, that's true.
Gabe, if I could add one thing to that list of promotions, if anybody's on Facebook and they don't follow Activities of 64D, that is a closed group. So please request acceptance. And I'm the administrator. I'd be happy to accept you. But I personally post, and anybody who's a member of the group can post any of the activities going on at 64D. And if you get them to me, I'll be happy to post them on your behalf. So Activities of 64D on Facebook. Please follow.
Sweet.
I actually have an event I'll send your way.
Do it. And guys, spread the word, really. I don't mind doing it. If y'all know about events and you want to get them posted, just email them to me. I'll post them up and spread the word. I am the DCO for 64D, so I just, that's just a fancy way of saying I flood everybody's newsfeed with stuff. So, but if y'all have anything or know of anybody with anything, just send it to me, email or text or whatever. I'll post it out for you, no problem.
All righty, boys. All right, let's close this thing down then. This is Rhit Moore signing off.
This is Billy Hamilton signing off.
This is Gabe Jagush signing off.
And this is Corey Harris signing off.